beside the internet for planes, the internet for cars, and we also have internet for cattle. All right, now we are coming to almost to the end of this panel, and let me just give you two indications which are interesting. You might have noted that the chairman and myself have a special watch, yes, which is an interesting device designed here to have this camera follow the person who is talking on the panel. This is an interesting development. Maybe it was financed by the finance Invest in Finland or something like that. But anyway, it's an interesting design. There is another thing which I would like to test for you, with you, which is the green box that this lady here has, and another green box there. So if you want to raise a couple of questions, you drop your questions in the box and we will hear it. So could we please, I have to look, we could have a couple of questions dropped in the box, listen to that and try to have an answer of the panel. Anyone would be kind enough to raise a question and drop it in the box? One here, one here. Any question? The box is there, and another one there. Oh, this is it. Thank you.
Hello, Aulis Koisto from Ericsson Oulu. Very interesting presentations throughout the morning. One interesting topic for breaking through in all of this IoT and big data is the security, as you have already several times repeated. But then the question is that how do we manage the different interests that different parties have? We talk about openness, but at the same time, if you think about from defense, if you think about financing, there are very much conflicting interests that may make it much more difficult to make it as open as we want to.
Thank you very much. We will answer the question, and maybe we could have another question on that side and the other box, complementary. We have some of the topics raised where a question of interest, where control rights and property rights on things wearing chips, new maintenance or engineering devices in the industry. We had a new look on service and the development of services combined with new things and new chips. Any question? Yes, please, here. Could we have the box on the right-hand side here? Madam? Here? Another question that I see, and we'll finish with the questions. On that side? Up there? Could you bring the box there? Please.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for all the interesting presentations. My name is Gottfried Smet from the European Shippers Council. I have a question. I haven't heard a lot about liability. And I think, for instance, if you look to cars, we now have a liability which is based on the driver. And you see that in other sectors, more and more, you have a liability based on the product liability, like we have, for instance, in air transportation already. How do you see the developments there? Because it could affect the cost price of a car or another product. Thank you very much.
Very good question. Thank you. Another question there? No? 1, 2, 3. All right, done. So the first question, thank you for raising it, on security. Who could give, among the panel, give some answers about the security matters and the management of, or the balance between various interests linked to the Internet of Things?
I can comment about the data. So open data, this is interesting thing, exactly what the gentleman from Ericsson said, that we're speaking about open data, but the data is closed today. Everyone owns their own data. So you don't share the data. And one good example is like we as an operator, we have 4.6 million mobile subscribers. Over 500,000 households are connected with fixed broadband in Finland, and we are 5.2 million people. We know exactly where you are, what you do, what websites you're browsing, all that, but we don't own the data. There are a lot of customers who would like to buy from us the data. Where are people going? From what point they are starting? Where do they go? And so forth. And regulation says that we cannot share the data. So now the interesting thing is that when we are speaking about IoT, we are speaking about open data. So it's, in my opinion, this is a big challenge. And then you come like an idea that it's my data. Do I share my data with Jean-Pierre? So this is a question what we have to solve in a short time to actually really run the open IoT solutions. So just a comment on that.
Thank you very much. Any other reaction? Denis Gardin, yes.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for industry, I mean, what we see is that big data is reallocating the value of different elements of the value chain, depending on where the data are generated and so on. So we have to, I mean, the current, setup and strategy of industrial groups in terms of how do I organize my supply chain and is it make or buy and so on, is based on what we used to know. And of course, in the contracts, we had a few things about the data, the ownership of the IP. Now we see we can generate new value from the data, which are maybe coming from a part of the value chain. And so all this has to be redefined in contracts, and the strategy also of every actors will have to evolve. That's what I think will happen.
And it certainly opens to liability, which is the second question. Yes, please, Mr. De Felice.
I guess I've heard a lot about openness, and I guess in this field, it's not necessarily about open data. I mean, a lot of the data that's processed through the IoT can also be personal data. So in the end, if I understand correctly your question, it's also about the commercial interests that are behind access to the data coming from the devices and the people. And as far as openness is concerned, openness may not necessarily be always the issue. I mean, issue is how do you access and how do you give consent to the fact that companies access your data. So this is, to me, a very interesting angle to look at the issue. Without, obviously, there's a number of other aspects related to open data and big data. But really, when it comes to personal data, it's about how do you give access and how do you know who's accessing your data. That's key.
Thank you. Antiomo.
Yeah, thanks. Because the liability question mentioned cars, and I was talking about them a lot, so I thought I'd comment on that. There is also product liability related to cars. You can ask anyone working at Volkswagen about that. But if we talk about IoT and transportation, if the vehicles and the different transport modes, trains, buses, if they operate normally, then the normal liability related to their performance is there. And really the genius idea is how do we make better use of these resources? And how do we reduce the complexity? Now I'm here, I need to be in a certain point on the other side of the town at 2 o'clock this afternoon. What is the best way of getting there without me figuring out how to get there using all possible means of transport? So it's really intelligence put on top of the infrastructure that for big part we already have.
Thank you. I think Mr. Lorinkai, a few words on the liability maybe?
Yeah, or actually rather on the data point, if I may. So I think just like one important thing is that there's two things. There's personal data and non-personal data. And of course, personal data is a much more sensitive area, and a lot of data is not clearly personal, even though it's connected to a person. So there, of course, the legal framework needs to have more flexibility in terms of allowing, processing of the non-personal data. And when it comes to the openness, I mean, data is, especially in sort of internet company context, it is. It's the IP, it's the trade secret of the company. Data, and especially what you do with the data, is hugely important for running the business. So, wouldn't make any sort of very you need to be very careful the way you manage the openness objective in this discussion.
Yes, I was thinking during part of this panel that we are always trying with the IT systems in general, we are restating many of the traditional property rights, not only on things, but also on intellectual property, industrial property, and part of the problem that you raised before, and that were raised linked to the two questions from our delegates, is certainly to restate clearly the validity and the limits of the property rights the way we thought they were stated with traditional liability and the civil law in continental Europe. Now, before I hand out the microphone to our chair for a few words of conclusion, I want to give you an idea on the fact that the organizers of this conference, IITM International, one of their associates has been very much involved with the Internet of Things. He is around, not here in the room right now, but he was in the room earlier during this session. His name is Hervé Ranou. He would have been a very useful contribution to this panel, but the panel was very large, so he stepped back, and I want to thank him for his discretion. It's not because he's one part of the organizers that he doesn't hide the right to speak, so you can see him, Hervé Ranou, during the lunch or in the following panel, and he can give you his understanding and his very nice knowledge on the Internet of Things. I owe that to the truth. Now, Chairman, thank you very much for your presence and chairmanship, and it's your privilege to conclude.
Thank you. I think everyone shares the opinion that IoT and the data will be the future. It will be important for all of us. And I have to give you just an idea, because we have been conducting, or we have had on IoT solutions now approximately 5 years. We have 5 million active devices which we are monitoring. We handle 100,000 events per second. So it's all about data. So with the data, we can serve our customers. And everything what we provide is as a service. You don't buy from us a router or switch. You buy a bandwidth, SLA, and quality of service. So we've been doing exactly the thing what we try to also sell and consult our customers, as a service. And then I think the point is that we could not be a successful operator without the IoT. And thank you for all of you. And let's see a brighter world. Yes, and have a lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so